The story kicks off with our protagonist Yuri refusing to reincarnate unless the goddess grants his requests. And she totally didn't expect a problem like this. She remembered that just a few minutes earlier, she told him he died from being sick and was about to be reincarnated into a new world. Yuri was a middle-aged guy who'd been sick for most of his later years. And now that he's dead, he's just a spirit. Then some girl calling herself a god just popped up out of nowhere telling him he's been chosen to be reincarnated into another world. And if he accepted, Yuri would also get the superpowers and skills he'd need to survive in that other world. The goddess was thankful it's so easy to explain stuff to young people these days. Then, Yuri asked her if he could also get abilities based on what he wished for. She said yeah and gave an example like if he wished for overwhelming power, he'd get strength-related skills. Or if he wanted a harem, he'd get charm skills for that. Yuri, being a middle-aged guy who was always overworked at his office job, demanded a self-sufficient slow life since he had been wanting that more than anything so he could just chill. So he asked the goddess to give him skills and magic that weren't for fighting, but for a good, comfortable, slow life. The goddess smiled and said that would be an easy task. But she didn't expect to regret her words almost immediately. It's because when she asked for his wishes, Yuri just went wild. So he kept asking for every skill he could think of and adding them to the list. The skills he wanted went over 10, which made her a little hesitant. She didn't mind though, since she could tell Yuri wasn't a bad person. So she accepted his requests and even gave him some extra abilities to help him survive in the new world. That's how Yuri's second life began, with him totally stoked to live his relaxing, slow life. But the second he arrived in the new world, Yuri couldn't even catch his breath before he had to run for his life from a wild boar. He couldn't believe how huge a wild boar could get. That thing was easily the size of a truck. It was like Truck-kun had followed him to finish the isekai job right. Yuri thought his second life was going to end right after it started, which would be the lamest joke in both of his lives. He needed to find a way to get to the abandoned village nearby and fast, the one the goddess told him about. For that, he remembered he might have the perfect skill for this emergency concealment. But then he realized he had no idea how to use his skills. So Yuri started running again because he'd totally die for nothing if he couldn't even use his skills. He kept trying to activate them by thinking of all kinds of words that might trigger them. Eventually, he managed to activate his concealment skill, which made him invisible, and the wild boar lost track of him. Yuri slowly hid behind some bushes, super relieved that the monster couldn't find him. Now was his chance to get out of there, which should be easy with his new younger body. Once he was safely out of danger, Yuri was mentally exhausted because he'd just barely escaped getting killed, all thanks to his healthy new body. He found a stream up ahead and tried to see his reflection. But because of concealment, he just blended into the scenery totally invisible. Yuri remembered reading some isekai stories back in his old world. So according to those, he should be able to check his status. He tried calling out status window and it popped up just like in a game. That's how he learned his new body was currently 7 years old, which means the goddess just lazily dropped the 3 from 37, his age in his past life. Next, he checked his skills and saw he had all these awesome abilities like appraisal, life, magic, language, master storage, and concealment, along with all the magical elements. Yuri was glad he drove a hard bargain with the goddess and got some sweet skills out of it. He decided to try them out once he got to his new base, since it was dangerous with all the monsters around here. And he couldn't just waste time out in the forest. He decided to keep concealment on while he moved around to help him avoid monsters. Still, Yuri was worried about what he'd do if he ran into another one. He knew he couldn't just run away forever, so he'd have to come up with a plan. He didn't have any combat skills to rely on either, so the only thing he could depend on for surviving a monster attack was this machete he got from the goddess. And if he couldn't figure out a plan to use it, he'd be dead for sure. Then his stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten anything since he got here. All he had to eat were a few nuts. And for the rest of the day, he still had to practice magic, set up defenses against monsters, find more food, and make a safe place to sleep. Yuri was a little worried because this didn't really feel like a slow life, since he had a crazy amount of stuff to do on his very first day. But that didn't change the fact that he had to do it all to survive. So he kept walking looking for that place. Eventually, Yuri found the abandoned village the goddess told him about. And after checking it out a little, he found open fields perfect for farming, no people to deal with. There were even some buildings he could start living in right away, even though they were a bit rundown. With that, he decided to go and check out the whole village. While he was looking around, he thought about the basic necessities: food, clothing, and shelter. He figured his current clothes were fine for now. And as for a house, he found a pretty promising one with a well right outside. Yuri went in to scope out the house, and legit the damage inside wasn't even that bad, so it should be an easy fix. After that, he was kinda getting a vibe for the kind of house and fences he wanted, plus where to put the fields. And the fact that this spot is smack in the middle of the village will make it super easy to defend and build out from later. With that settled, the only thing bugging him now was food. And from the looks of it, he'd have to hunt for his meals for now. He scanned the fields around the village and, lucky for him, found some wheat and potatoes just growing on their own after the village got ditched. So now all he had to do was clear out the weeds and prep the fields to get these crops growing and multiply them. But since this was a whole new world, he had to be sure they weren't poisonous or something. So Yuri popped his appraisal skill on them and found out they were legit edible and totally farmable. He looked around some more and found some harvested wheat, which was good to eat, but you couldn't plant it. That sparked an idea to use this wheat as bait for some birds and catch them with the old-school tricks he learned in his last life. Yuri went on the hunt for birds, and when he spotted a couple of them, he tossed some wheat their way and the birds totally fell for it. Now Yuri figured it'd be way easier to catch them with traps, but then it hit him, he had fire and wind magic that could make this a piece of cake. Suddenly he heard a voice whisper, "Be careful." Yuri whipped around, but he couldn't see where the voice came from or what it was warning him about. Just then, that same crazy boar from before came charging right at him, and Yuri couldn't believe that thing had tracked his scent all the way to the village. As the boar totally jumped him, Yuri barely dodged it. Then he slammed on his concealment skill to go invisible again. His first thought was to bail on it again just like before, but then he saw the wild boar just wrecking houses left and right trying to find him. Yuri realized if he just let that thing keep going, it was definitely going to trash his new home too. He had to protect his spot, but Yuri had no clue if he could stop that monster with the super basic farming powers the goddess gave him. He could tell just by looking that facing the boar was a bad idea in his current state, which meant he had no choice but to give up and ditch the village. But Yuri knew that was a no-go because wandering around this new world was way riskier, and there probably wasn't a safer spot anywhere close. On top of that, even if Yuri did run, that boar would just keep chasing him since it probably saw him as some invader on its turf. This left him with only one option to throw down with this thing right here, right now. His situation was basically the same as the boar's, since they were both just fighting to survive. Yuri had always dreamed of living free out in nature, so he knew he couldn't just run from nature when it got real. He decided to man up and handle this himself. He wasn't about to give up, and was going to do his best to beat this challenge on his way to his slow life. For a second, Yuri imagined he could just use fire magic to one-shot the wild boar. You know, show off some epic firepower and prove he was the top dog to all the monsters in the area. But yeah, that was pure fantasy since he was the one who picked the chill life with starter pack skills. The moment he even thought about fighting, his body totally froze, and he just stayed hidden. Yuri checked out his stats and skills one more time, and he knew they were at seriously low levels. But for a change, he wondered if maybe since they came from a goddess, they packed more punch than they looked. And what if his other skills were secretly as OP as his concealment? I mean, that boar couldn't even sniff him out when he was using it. That was enough to make him decide to trust his powers. So he tried to cast fire magic, really focusing. Once he felt like he could do it, Yuri unleashed his first spell trying to shoot a fireball at the wild boar. But plot twist, his fire magic let out a tiny little spark which barely traveled a few inches before flopping onto the ground. Yuri was floored that he'd just given away his position. He couldn't believe he actually counted on something so lame and blew his cover. Because of that, the boar found him and was about to stomp him flat. Yuri was totally freaking out and panicking, so he just desperately spammed his other magic skills. But that just made the wild boar even more ticked off, and it started chasing him like crazy. Yuri wondered if there was some trick to using magic. Then he used earth magic, of level 3, and managed to make an earth wall pop up. He thought for sure that would stop it, but the wild boar just smashed right through the wall, putting Yuri in a jam again. But then Yuri calmed down a bit when he saw that the boar actually got its neck stuck in the busted wall, which gave him an opening to strike. He decided to go with the machete this time instead of magic. And from all those wild animal vids he watched in his past life, he knew that an animal's weak spot is its throat. Yuri locked his eyes on the boar's throat and forced his shaking hands to get steady, which had never taken a life before. But if he missed this shot, it was game over for him. Yuri was determined to survive no matter what, so he took a leap and just aimed for the wild boar's neck right as the boar was about to break free from the wall. It was a seriously close call, but Yuri finally managed to take down the wild boar, all thanks to his quick thinking. And now that he thinks about it, he thought this was way easier than he expected. Now he was wondering what he should do with this thing. Then he recalled reading a novel about how to process meat by drawing the blood and cooling down the body. But for that he would need a large enough river, and he can't just take the risk of going out in the forest yet. Just then, the same voice from before asked him if he's okay. But when he turned and asked who and where it was, the voice replied, "They're over his head." Yuri realized that voice actually belonged to those birds, and they claimed he's the first one who could understand their words. Yuri was definitely at a loss for words until he realized he could talk to birds thanks to his language skill. He thought that skill was to help him communicate with humans of this world, but it seems he could even talk to animals with it. And as for the wild boar, he couldn't communicate with it because it had no intent to talk at all. Yuri figures he'll try talking to them next time before hunting them, but it could also lead to trouble since he needs to hunt them for meat. For now, the birds asked him if he wanted to know where the river was, and when he nodded to that, they showed him the direction to the river and added, "It's a really big one, so it'll be helpful for him." Yuri asked them why they were helping him out, to which they replied they wanted to thank him for the meal earlier. Yuri learned they just wanted to return the favor for wheat, and now he saw them off by waving his hands, then got back to his work. He felt really thankful that he didn't attack those birds. And since they said the river is nearby, he figured he'd move the wild boar's body over there. To move the heavy body, he decided to use the storage skill he got. And when he touched the boar, it really got stored inside the skill, and he wouldn't even have to worry about it spoiling. Now, this is what he calls a cheat skill, and he's finally starting to have fun in this other world. Yuri's eager to head to the river, and for the way he used the concealment skill to hide his presence for safety. After that, he eventually arrived at the river and used the water magic to wash away the blood by the river. Then he removed the organs and submerged them in the river water for cleaning. Once he was done, he used the water to clean the body again. And while it was cooling down, he was all tired, so he just sat around to take a look at his stats again. He learned that he ended up using almost half of his magic power without realizing it. And these numbers in front must be the bare minimum for stats. And the fact he was able to defeat that boar means that boar must have also been bare minimum in the forest, and there are way stronger monsters out there. Apparently at this point, Yuri's perception was out of sync with the common world because there was no way for him to know that his abilities are not bare minimum, but actually way stronger than that, because a wild boar is something even strong warriors of this world would struggle against. And as for the fact he used water magic to drain out blood, that was impressive, because it's difficult for any water magic user to control any liquid except for water, which makes his abilities qualified to be a cheat already. However, it'll take him a while to learn this fact. And now he went back home with all the meat and butchered it into pieces. As he made preparations for cooking it, he made a makeshift oven with the earth magic, ignited the flames with fire magic. Then he placed the meat right above the fire to let it slowly cook over time. Yuri got excited once the meat was cooked properly, and this was his first time getting to eat a hearty meal ever since he got admitted to the hospital in his previous life. Now, the moment he gets his hands on some meat, he can't wait to try it. So without any delay, he dives right in to take a healthy bite of the meat and chew it to his heart's content. Yuri was so totally lost in the exquisite taste that he ended up screaming in exaggeration, and his voice could be heard around the forest. He couldn't have asked for better cooked meat, and every bite of it burst with flavor, and he could feel his strength increasing with a filled-up belly. It's been so long since he tasted something this good, and this made him feel like he's finally alive. He hadn't truly felt alive ever since arriving here, but this meat and all the efforts he did to gain it were totally worth it. After he ate to his heart's content, Yuri's food worries were solved, and now he just needs to find a safe bed before nightfall. First off, he planned a map for his house, and also where to set traps, so that he would have clear goals in mind. The next task he had to do was to build a wall. He was confused if he should break down uninhabitable houses and make fences from the wood, but that would take too long, and he also lacked the tools and strength to do it. He could try stacking stones like a castle wall, but that would also take too much time to do. So his last option was to rely on earth magic for that, even though there's a chance wild boars would break through it just like this one. He wonders if he should remove small stones to try increasing its strength. But for that, he would need a lot of precision. Precision that will come with practice. Thus, Yuri started practicing with earth magic by first making some cups made of soil, and after some trial and error, he managed to make one with better hardness like a stone and perfect shape like he wanted. He figured if he can achieve this level of hardness with a cup, he's experienced enough to try the same thing on earth walls. He got right to work on the wall. And after trying out the same method and precision, Yuri managed to create perfect walls for his boundaries. He kept the dimensions of wall pieces exactly the same and made a border around his house. He thought of it as his castle at first until Yuri realized it feels more like a prison with consistent space. He didn't even have time to make a door in this boundary, but now whatever's done is done because he needs to make do with anything, as long as he gets to rest tonight as it's getting dark. He was almost done with every task he had in mind for today, and the last one was to get drinking water. He can't believe he ended up putting this off for last. But with everything that happened, it couldn't be helped either. He went to check the well he found while exploring the village, and thankfully it was covered with a lid. He tried dropping a pebble to check inside, and judging by the sound, there seemed to be water down there. Now Yuri had to come up with a way to draw it up, so he decided to use water magic. He imagined floating water in space down there, which helped him control the water in the well, and he managed to pull it up without any trouble. He thought it might be dirty, but the water seemed just fine thanks to whoever put the lid on the well earlier. He made sure the water was safe to drink with appraisal, and still just to be safe, Yuri planned on boiling it before drinking it. Later on, he was glad everything was finally done for the day. Although his very first day in this world was quite chaotic, he hadn't done any cleaning, nor prepared any bedding, so for today, he made a makeshift bed with the leaves he gathered. He thought about how much more he still needed to do in the future, but that kind of pleased him because he's finally free to do whatever he likes, making him excited to see what tomorrow holds. But the very next morning, he didn't feel so happy as his whole body hurt from lying on the ground, and it was cold as well. Those leaves weren't anywhere near enough for bedding or protection from the cold ground. So he made it his priority for today to make a futon out of that wild boar's fur. He can't ignore having a nice place to sleep anymore, since that's literally the foundation of his slow life. He wondered if an amateur like him could work with leather, so he checked out his skills list, and there he saw a unique skill named Countryside Living Guide. This skill seemed like it would come in handy, since it contained all the knowledge one would require to live in a rural area, and it was one of the skills that the goddess added herself as a bonus. He tried searching for knowledge that could help him with wild boar fur tanning, and in results he got exactly what he needed the knowledge to do so. Yuri began right away and removed the dirt from the fur. Then he removed the fat with the knife, and it wasn't as easy as it looked. The next step was even more tiresome, since it required him to leave the fur in a tanning solution for 2 weeks. Otherwise, it'll rot away. Yuri was troubled as he didn't have a tanning solution prepared beforehand, so he needed to hurry. But the tanning solution wasn't that easy to make since it required him water, salt, and alum. He gave up on that and decided to just add more leaves to the bed for now and focus on doing something else. Next was to clean and repair the house, for which he drew a rough map of the house's interior and started cleaning by removing the unnecessary stuff. He thoroughly checked the kitchen, dining room, living space, and bedroom, and the place gave him an idea of how the villagers must have lived here in the past. He could tell they must have slept on some kind of mat, but he can't make do with that since he's used to a bed. Yuri decided to do one of those DIY projects with his magic, and he kept working on the house floor style with earth magic and made it concrete-like and suitable for a colder floor for the summer. He adopted a traditional Japanese-style earthen floor for the hearth area, after which he went on to make more use of earth magic, using it to make utensils, tableware, and other stuff. Yuri was unaware, but he had acquired a rare level of earth magic in the process. And after the repairs and renovations, he used wind magic to blow away the trash since he didn't have any cleaning tools. Although the dust was all around him, he was glad at least the house was finally clean. And maybe he'll try using beast fat candles tomorrow. As dusk neared, he went to finish small tasks and went to sleep. The next day, Yuri was crying because he didn't read all his stats earlier because he didn't know when. But he already had portable water, a water pouch, winter fur, and some potions for health and magic along with a letter. He didn't expect to have the fur already when he struggled so much just to obtain it. Moreover, what shocked him even more was the content of the letter addressed to him by God, stating that this world is called for, and she wanted him to know that he shouldn't mention his skills and unique skills to anyone if he were ever to meet locals in this world. That was just one of the surprises, since the more surprising one was the properties of life magic he got. It contained skills like ignition, purification, and lightning. Yuri didn't know he didn't have to manually wipe himself anymore either thanks to purification, which means he was doing some pointless things when he already had to use the time wisely. He figured he hadn't changed much from his past life. Since then, too, he always played games without reading instructions and tutorials first. Yuri had been cautious for some time, but he now realizes he was a bit careless too. But that aside, he had breakfast with the roasted meat. However, it's his third day of eating plain roasted meat, and now he was bored of this taste. Yuri wished God would have just given him some spices as well, if she could afford to give so many skills to him. He decided to check around the other abandoned houses to see if he would find any salt left behind by the villagers. Yuri then came across a map, and luckily it had remained intact without weathering. The map was easy to read for him, but there seemed to be a place marked with a cross, which kind of worried him since it could be either a dangerous place or perhaps a resource. He decided to just head out and check it out for himself. While Yuri was walking through the forest with the map in hand, he was able to move more smoothly than before. Yuri hoped he could come across a treasure lying around. Not that he wanted to be rich or anything, but he wanted to check it out and see what could be there. Eventually, Yuri came across an area with no path which had no tall trees, meaning it might have been a road in the past. He was worried that the overgrown grasses here might have unknown poisonous plants or large bugs. He thought of checking it out later, since it didn't look safe right now. But then Yuri remembered he had magic, so he shouldn't keep thinking like he did in the past since he's different now. He used a wind cutter to slash the overgrown grasses, and it seemed to be going smoother than expected. Yuri was glad this didn't take much time, and now he proceeded ahead while using appraisal to check if there were any poisonous plants. He came across some edible plants that could be useful in cooking, and there seemed to be more kinds of useful plants here. Yuri then spotted yams, which if used properly in cooking could be really healthy and more valuable than gold and silver. Naturally, yams take more than 10 years to harvest, and digging them up is really troublesome since their roots stretch deep underground and can break easily. But since he had earth magic now, digging them out was a child's play. However, Yuri didn't expect yams to look so weird like cookie dolls, and he wondered if this thing was really the same yam he was thinking of. He was worried it could be a monster, but that didn't seem to be the case either. He thought it might just be different in appearance in this world. Then Yuri suddenly felt weird, as if something dangerous was approaching him. He wanted to leave right away after sensing the danger, but he was suddenly attacked out of nowhere, and he barely managed to avoid it. Yuri couldn't even see this attack coming, and if he hadn't sensed it in time, he would have died. He wondered if this was an attack by some monster or locals. Then he sensed another thing and found out there was a praying mantis right behind him, which also had the ability to turn invisible. Yuri was scared because this could be dangerous, so he first tried to see if he could communicate with this monster like he did with birds. He asked the monster if they could just pretend he never came here, but the mantis didn't even listen completely and attacked him again. Yuri dodged it in time since he could see the attack this time, but that just meant he would have to fight that thing. The mantis turned invisible again, and one thing from it could kill him. He sharpened his senses and managed to dodge another attack, which made him realize he might have some perception skill. His guess was right, as his perception skill was a passive one and active all the time, helping him sense any movements around himself. Yuri focused on his perception skill actively until he was able to feel the mantis. Unfortunately, it seemed like the mantis couldn't erase its presence. Yuri prepared to counterattack with water magic, which he learned recently could be used to produce water out of thin air. He used the water magic to form a large bubble of water and cover the mantis's body, making it die painfully without getting oxygen. Yuri didn't want to kill that thing without meaning, so he figured he could use the mantis's arms like a sickle for farming. He wanted to catch it without harming it, but to his surprise, Yuri came across parasites coming out of the mantis's body. He was scared these parasites might take over his body if he stayed any longer. So he ran away, leaving the mantis behind. After a while, he figured he'd be getting close to the place marked with a cross, and eventually he came across a cave, which should be the place. He decided to make a stick with earth magic and used boar skin to turn it into a torch. Inside, he found signs that the cave was dug by human hands, but it didn't look like there were any resources here. He wondered if there was something further ahead in the cave. So to find out, he kept walking, and eventually his footing started feeling a bit unsteady. He guessed he had no choice but to find a town later on to trade stuff. He wished if only there were some real treasure, he could have had it easy. Yuri then came across a shiny rock illuminated by the light pouring from the giant stalactite, and this scenery was a treasure itself for him. He took it back home by storing it in storage, and found out it was actually the super needed salt that he needed. Now that he can eat meat roasted with salt, Yuri's life has changed, and his slow life is now more like it. However, at this point, he wonders if he really had a slow life until now, and it feels like he's forgetting about something important. He realized it's none other than the most important part of slow life agriculture. He prepared the tools that would be required for farming, and for the first task he needs to plow the field. He used earth magic to remove unwanted weeds. Then he tilled the soil to make a proper foundation for sowing seeds. Yuri realized he had already made a hoe for farming, but in the end, he didn't use it. He just decided to do one row of the field manually, after which he was done preparing the field. Next, he needed fertilizer like manure from cows, horses, or birds, but it seemed like he couldn't get any of that in the current environment. He wondered what he should do now. Then the birds from before came and asked him what he was doing. Yuri got an idea and kept looking at them intensely while the birds wondered what he was thinking. Yuri figured if they helped him secure the manure from their group, it would make things easier. But there was no way he could just ask them to come here and poop for him. The birds asked him what happened to him, to which he replied he was just thinking about something, but come to think of it, he hadn't introduced himself to them yet. So Yuri introduced himself and asked what their names were. The birds asked him what their names were, to which Yuri replied, "They're just names and everyone has their own." The birds didn't understand the concept of naming, so Yuri just told them to call him Yuri from now on. He felt nice to have someone to talk to, and he still hadn't met any humans since coming to this world. He didn't mind it since that would be annoying anyway. And now he went to get started on preparing fertilizer. The birds asked him what he was doing, to which he replied he was collecting weeds to make fertilizer out of them. Now he brought out the pot in which he had collected plant ashes, which would be helpful as they contained nutrients necessary for the fields. He spread the ash throughout the field, which reminded him of the story of the old man who makes flowers bloom from withered trees. Once he finished with preparations, Yuri wondered what he should grow first. He had options to grow wheat potatoes, and lastly the yam he found before. He didn't really feel like eating it though, so he wondered if he should just try burying it for now. Next, he wanted to know about the seasons in this world. And since the goddess said she chose a world with a similar climate, this one should be going through summer right now. So he tried planting some wheat in that case. But when he placed seeds on the field, the birds thought Yuri was giving them more food. Yuri told them that it wasn't for eating because he wanted to grow crops from those seeds. The birds didn't really understand what farming was, so he had to explain everything to them. And when he asked them to help out a bit, they ended up pulling some of the wheat instead. Later on, Yuri ended up planting various types of crops, and the crops he planted sprouted pretty quickly with wood magic. He made sure to water the plants with water magic, and whenever the weather was bad, he used light magic for photosynthesis. When the sunlight was too strong, he used dark magic to provide shade for the plants. It was Yuri's first time farming, but thanks to various spells he begged the goddess for, he was able to get the farming done right without any trouble. 2 months later, Yuri's residence had developed quite well over time, and he was currently having the time of his life thanks to all the hard work he had done so far. He had rebuilt the walls properly over time, so now he didn't have to worry about monster attacks or fields getting ruined. And since the feeling of being trapped was gone now, he could relax without any worries. He also made friends with those birds who kept visiting him, and he named them Sakura and Omoi. Things did get noisy at times whenever they brought their friends along, but they wouldn't be here for long in this forest, because birds need to cross over the sea before it gets cold in winter. So once they head out in search of warm lands, Yuri feels like he might miss them. He thought he wanted to live alone, but now he couldn't help feeling lonely. Right then, Sakura and Omoi came to Yuri to report something bad had happened. Yuri asked them what happened or if they were attacked by monsters, but they replied they had seen a small human collapsed on the ground in the forest. Yuri grew worried and quickly headed out to check since this forest isn't safe for little humans. As they were taking him to the place, they saw the little one before Yuri wondered what a child was doing so deep in the forest like this. And it's possible a traveler got their child separated. He hoped they didn't just abandon a child here. Yuri kept following the birds until he arrived at the tree where they saw the little human. But Yuri couldn't see anyone here, so he tried shouting to let the child know that he was here to help, so they could come out if they were hiding. However, he got no response, which meant they might have moved somewhere else. The birds asked him to look closely down the tree, and when he did, he noticed something was indeed there. Yuri was surprised when he realized the little human the birds saw was actually a fairy. It was his first time seeing a fairy, and just like in fairy tales, they do glow softly and are beautiful to look at. But this is not the time to appreciate her beauty since she collapsed, and he needed to do something about it. Yuri was thankful she didn't seem to have any injuries or illnesses, but it seemed her mana was running low. He decided to use the mana recovery potion he got from the goddess, but he needed to be careful since she had a very small mouth to give her the potion. Yuri tried to be as slow and careful as possible, but he ended up sneezing and spilling the whole potion on her. He was startled since the fairy was now drowning in the potion that was supposed to save her. But it turned out he didn't need to worry since the fairy woke up, which meant she was fine. But she was like totally fuming, thinking he'd pulled something sketchy, which made Yuri feel super guilty for no reason. He had to break down the whole sitch for her. Then the fairy basically told him he should feel blessed to even get the chance to help her and talk to her. Yuri was like, okay, you might be tiny, but that attitude is huge. She clapped back that spirits don't normally mess with humans. And when she said that, it finally clicked for Yuri that she was a spirit, not that he knew what the difference even was. Then she introduced herself as, get this, the spirit of alcohol. And yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. She literally gets her power from booze. Yuri asked for her name and she was all, spirits don't have those. The birds totally cracked up since they don't have names either. That totally set the spirit off. So Yuri asked her, but isn't it like super inconvenient not having a name? The spirit shot back, we don't really talk to humans, so it's literally never been an issue. And when it comes to other spirits, we just use our unique powers to know who's who. Though, she admitted, now that a human like you is talking to me, it might actually help a little to have a name. So she told him he could call her whatever. Yuri got this major deja vu vibe because she basically just admitted he was right. He gave her this knowing look, which made her all worried, asking if he was going to just ditch a weak spirit who just passed out. Once she was sure he wasn't going to bail, she decided to just crash with him for a bit until she powered up again. Though let's be real, it felt more like she was forcing her way into his life. Anyway, Yuri took her back to the village, and she was totally shook by how huge his place was. Yuri just decided to keep his mouth shut. Then the spirit noticed the whole village had this abandoned vibe. She asked if that meant his family set up camp in a ghost town or something. He was like, nah, it's not like that, explaining he's pretty much on his own most of the time, but the birds swing by sometimes, so he doesn't feel totally alone. The spirit felt super bad for him since in her eyes, he was just this kid living by himself in some creepy abandoned village in the woods, and it seemed like he must be having it rough. Yuri was so confused why she was giving him the pity eyes. Then she hit him with, so if it's just one kid in this whole village, does that mean there's zero alcohol at all? Yuri just nodded, and the poor spirit of alcohol looked totally crushed. I mean, she was really banking on finding some booze here. She asked if there wasn't even one single barrel of sake. Yuri confirmed it was a big nope. He'd already searched every nook and cranny of the ghost town. There wasn't a single clue that sake was ever even made here. The spirit was like, how am I supposed to live? Because she needs sake to survive, and at this rate she's just gonna starve to death. Yuri was like, what am I supposed to do about it? Then he asked if she could just get by on potions, since a potion literally just saved her. The spirit said she could get energy from stuff besides alcohol, but it just tastes nasty. Plus, her sense of taste gets worse and worse the longer she goes without booze. Hearing that Yuri told her if she was serious about staying here, she'd have to make some sacrifices because he was already being super nice sharing his precious potions. She totally got the message, and Yuri figured she'd just decide to bounce. But since she didn't look like she was leaving, he guessed he was stuck taking care of her for a while. The only problem was her meals, since he was down to his last 2 magic potions and he kinda needed those for himself, you know. So he got an idea and decided to just go for it. A little later, the spirit was snoozing in a tree while Yuri gathered a ton of herbs to try and brew some potions. He even whipped up some bottles using his earth magic to store them. But unluckily, he had 0 ingredients to make sake with at the moment. Now, he needed a crash course on how to make potions since he'd never done it before. So he pulled up his skill guide to see what it knew. He searched for potion crafting, and boom, it actually worked, giving him a bunch of results with recipes for all kinds of potions and antidotes. Yuri read that all the basic potions for recovery and special effects could be made with regular, easy-to-find herbs, while the really good stuff needed high-level materials and skills. Luckily, he actually had the right stuff on hand for a few types of potions, so he just went all in and cranked out every single potion he possibly could. He kind of figured he went overboard, but hey, at least the spirit wouldn't be starving anytime soon. Plus, there was a bonus for him because he unlocked a new alchemy skill from making so many potions. It was total proof that he could still level up, and maybe do even crazier stuff than the powers God gave him. Just then, the spirit spotted all the bottles and was like, wait, weren't you almost out of potions? To which he replied, yeah, I just made these for you. She'd never heard of a kid who could make potions, but whatever. Yuri just asked her to give them a try. The spirit was super hesitant, but she finally took a tiny sip and told him it wasn't good. Yuri couldn't really help it since he only knew basic recipes for now. But then she added that this one was way better than any other potion she'd ever had. That totally made his day. Then the spirit just took off for a walk acting all tough, and not saying another word, you know the type. So Yuri looked down at the potion bottle totally relieved that she actually drank it. Still, he couldn't help but wonder what made his potion so different from a normal one. Meanwhile, the spirit had been thinking for a bit now. That kid wasn't normal, and he was different from any human she'd ever seen before. Even without booze, she figured it might not be so bad to stick around for a while. Since then, 2 weeks had passed, and it was almost the peak of summer. Farming in this kind of heat could be deadly, but it was totally fine for our boy since he could just use dark magic for shade water magic to stay hydrated and finally wind magic to cool off. The spirit pointed out his magic power was definitely not normal because she had never seen anyone use so much magic power, especially for farming of all things. Yuri told her he might as well use what he's got, and he still had plenty of magic power left to handle whatever came up. The spirit wasn't interested in being outside, so she went back inside to take a nap. Yuri didn't mind. It's not like he expected her to do much work since she was pretty much just his neighbor now. Luckily, not much had changed in his life since she showed up. And for a guy like him, her personality was a total blessing. Now he looked at the sky, and it seemed like it was going to be really hot for a few days. So he probably needed some clothes for the peak of summer. He decided to go look for some useful materials in the forest. While he was out there, Yuri remembered. This forest is pretty lush, and has all sorts of plants. So if he looked closely even among the weeds, he might be able to find something useful. Eventually, he found some perennial grasses that grow in the wild, and their stems could be used to get fibers. This was exactly what he needed. And since there were tons of them, Yuri decided to gather a bunch so he could make some clothes out of it later. After that, he walked a little farther and came across an even more awesome find cotton. But his happiness turned to disappointment when he also saw a swarm of mosquitoes. Yuri didn't want to go anywhere near that swarm of mosquitoes. And now that he thought about it, Yuri realized he'd only been focused on magical beasts until now, and maybe in the process, he'd ignored the most dangerous thing out there, the mosquito. It's a well-known fact that mosquitoes are the creatures that kill the most humans on Earth by spreading diseases through their bites. Yuri knew there were probably a lot of other insects out here too, so it was super careless of him not to have thought about a plan for them. On top of that, he knew it wouldn't be weird to run into diseases and viruses here that don't exist on Earth, which meant he couldn't treat himself if he got sick. The moment Yuri realized that, he felt a massive wave of anxiety and fear. So he quickly bolted, putting the plan for clothes on the back burner and focusing on finding some bug repellent. Now, he activated appraisal to search for plants he could use to make insect repellent. It took him a few hours to finally find some plants with insect-repelling properties, and in old Japan they used to make mosquito coils from these. However, to make the repellent, he'd have to let the flowers sit for 6 months, which was just way too long. And winter was coming soon. He wondered if there was another way. Then, after thinking for a bit, he decided to try a drastic method out of desperation. He burned some of those plants inside the house which spread insect-repelling smoke everywhere, and it should keep the place safe from any bugs. Just then he saw something shoot out of the house at rocket speed, and it turned out to be the spirit who was practically suffocating in there, and she yelled at him for treating her like a pest. Yuri apologized, saying he didn't realize she'd be inside. Then she mentioned, it's weird that he's only just now deciding to deal with pests when it's already summer. She also knew that pests could be deadly for humans, and the worst ones could drain his magic dry, which could also kill him. Yuri then asked her to teach him something he didn't know. And she didn't mind helping him out a little, although she'd help him a lot more if he just made some alcohol for her. Yuri shot that idea down immediately, since he still had a ton of work to do. The next day she told him how much she wanted some booze, sighing about how nice it would be if some kid would just make some. Yuri asked her how she didn't know how to make alcohol when she was literally the spirit of alcohol and still didn't even have a name. By now it had been 2 months since she moved in, and Yuri had thought of a few names for her, but she shot them all down since she didn't like any of them. In the end, he just ended up calling her Hey, and she called him You, like they were back at square one. Eventually it was time for the harvest. And Yuri was super excited for this day. He figured with this much wheat he could make himself some bread and udon noodles. But before he headed into the fields, the spirit told him to wait, and said they should have a competition to see who could harvest the crops first. And if she won, he had to make beer with the barley. To Yuri, that sounded totally one-sided. So he asked her what he would get if he won. In that case, she told him she'd do whatever he said, but he didn't really have anything to ask for. Just then he thought of something and asked her to never talk about alcohol to him again if he won. She called him heartless for making a condition like that. But since all she had to do was not lose, she accepted the challenge. They got ready with sickles on opposite sides of the field, and so the barley harvesting competition began. Yuri started cutting the wheat quickly and neatly, thinking she'd definitely have trouble with that tiny body of hers. But he was so wrong. The moment beer was on the line, she was suddenly a speed demon driven by her major cravings. She made it crystal clear she couldn't do life without her drinks anymore. Since it was basically her lifeblood, and she was giving it her all, Yuri realized he'd totally underestimated her lazy vibe. But if she actually won, he'd have to use up their precious food supply just to make her booze. Well, no turning back now, so he decided to get serious. The spirit figured she had one row in the bag, so the rest would be a total breeze. But then she was completely shook when she saw Yuri use wind magic to slice through all the weeds at once. She realized this was a game she never could have won. Not that Yuri was thrilled about it. He kinda wanted to just chill and enjoy the moment, but she forced his hand. Now that he'd won, he told her to stick to her end of the bargain. But the spirit was so offended, since she had no clue he could pull a move like that. She accused him of just getting a kick out of messing with her. Yuri just reminded her that, hello, she was the one who challenged him. He explained again that it's not like he was swimming in food, and anyway, she seemed to be getting by just fine with potions. So he just wanted her to be a little more chill as a guest. The spirit told him to just drop it and apologize for being so selfish. She asked him to just forget the whole thing and then she just bounced. Yuri felt a pang of guilt like it was all his fault. This was exactly why he preferred flying solo. That aside, he figured she'd just crawl back when she got hungry. But when the sun came up, she still wasn't home, making him freak out a little, wondering if she'd left for good. He really hoped she didn't get jumped by some monster. But even so, why should he care? Still, Yuri couldn't deny he was worried sick about her. So he grabbed his machete and headed into the forest to find her. Meanwhile, the spirit was out there totally lost, wondering what the heck she was supposed to do now. Now that she'd run off, she couldn't go back to Yuri's, but it didn't seem like there were any other towns nearby. Plus, going back to her old town was a definite no-go, so she decided to just find a safe place to crash for the night. Along the way, she found some raspberries, and they were actually super high quality. Raspberries have that perfect mix of sweet and tart, which makes them awesome for making wine. She remembered Yuri wanted to grow fruit, so it'd probably be a good idea to tell him about this spot. But then again, she couldn't just show up with her tail between her legs, unless he came looking for her and begged her to come back. Yeah, right, like that would ever happen. Then she heard a sound right behind her, making her wonder if Yuri actually came for her. She tried to act all tough like she was still mad, but then she realized it wasn't Yuri, it was a wild boar. She freaked out and made a run for it, which led her to a much quieter spot. But even there, a snake monster ambushed her, and then a crazy bird dive-bombed her from the sky. It felt like one dangerous thing after another was coming for her. She started wondering what was up with this forest with all these insane monsters everywhere. There was no way she could get out like this. She started to feel like maybe leaving Yuri's place was a huge mistake. But then she heard a rustling in the bushes, probably another monster. But this time it was Yuri who'd found her with a little help from some birds. He looked so relieved that she was okay and asked her to come home. The spirit just burst into tears, and even though she was secretly ecstatic, she agreed, saying, "Fine if you're going to ask so nicely." Later, when they got back, she asked him why he even bothered looking for her. Yuri told her he couldn't just ditch her out there and admitted that it was partly his fault she took off. He felt like he'd been acting super immature for his age, so he was sorry for everything. She teased that he was the one being childish now, and admitted she was sorry for being selfish too. She promised not to bring up drinks again. Then Yuri said he was actually thinking of expanding the fields, so he wasn't sure when, but after that was done, he'd be down to try making some booze when the time was right. She asked him, "What's with the sudden change of heart?" He told her it reminded him of when he just wanted to be free from living on meds, unable to eat anything he actually liked. So anyway, he was actually looking forward to them working together from now on, calling her Marcia, a new name he'd thought up. She was like, "Is that supposed to be my name now?" And Yuri told her it was the name of the goddess of wine in his old hometown. He said he wouldn't push it if she hated it. But the spirit actually loved the name. She accepted it and thanked him for thinking of it for her. Meanwhile, in a village about 10 kilometers from Yuri's place at the edge of the woods, the locals were fighting for their lives against a massive bear monster. If they let that thing into town, it would be game over. The bear was totally overwhelmed by the dozens of people defending the village and got chased back into the forest. The guy leading the charge was just glad the bear bailed and that it was a flat-out miracle that they had 0 casualties from that attack. One of the villagers asked their leader if they were going to chase the bear. He shot back, "No way, we're not going deep into that forest. Besides, there are way more dangers lurking in there. We stay clear of the forest because it's become a hotbed for crazy strong monsters and now apparently even a village. It was totally abandoned, cause like nobody could live there anymore. But our boy Yuri? He had 0 clue his house was smack dab in the middle of the demon realm, and when Marcia brought up raspberries, he was like, bet, and decided to go find them the next day. He had no idea some crazy powerful monster was closing in on his village. The next day, Yuri was so stoked he went and got those raspberries. And OMG, they were amazing. He'd been craving something sweet like this forever, and now that he had them, he totally wanted to grow more in his fields. Marcia was like, "Dude, don't eat them all. Since they're a super rare find we need for brewing's sake later." He told her not to sweat it. He couldn't eat that many anyway, but he was kind of wondering if she could for real make alcohol with just fruit. She told him that usually it's standard to add sugar to the fruit and let it ferment. But since these raspberries were already so sugary, they should work with just some simple processing. She walked Yuri through the steps, crushed the washed fruit, then pop it in a clean jar and let it ferment in a dark, breezy spot for a few months. He'd just have to stir it once a day to get the fermentation going. And Yuri asked, "Are you sure that's it, nothing else?" She replied that after you do all that, it's pretty much a game of chance. And if the right bacteria show up, it'll turn into alcohol, otherwise it'll just spoil. Yuri had no way to check for bacteria, even with his appraisal skill. So he had no choice but to rely on a method that was basically pure luck. He kept redoing the process she told him about and made sure to stir the raspberries once a day, letting them ferment away in a corner of the house. Marcia was practically vibrating with excitement to drink alcohol since it had been so long. Yuri thought she literally looked like a little kid from elementary school. Then something he'd been curious about popped into his head. He asked Marcia why she was just passed out in the forest when he found her. Like if she was an alcohol spirit, shouldn't she be living it up safely in a sake brewery? He wondered, did they kick you out or something? But hearing that made her go dead silent for a moment before she looked at Yuri with these super intense eyes and cupped his cheeks, thanking him for asking. She really wanted him to hear her story because she'd been through a lot. She said she'd lived in a huge city sake brewery for years and years. And the old master of the brewery was a super kind dude who totally understood spirits. The sake the old man made was top-notch thanks to the spirits' blessing, and the humans offered sake back to the spirits as payment. So they'd been helping each other out since ancient times. But after the old man passed away, his son took over the brewery, which was the absolute worst twist of fate. He was all about profit and started cutting corners on materials and labor, which made the sake quality completely nosedive. But he didn't even care since he knew people would keep buying it, because of their family's long-standing reputation. What's worse, that guy even tried to get rid of her thinking she was some pest stealing their sake. He went so far as to hire a spirit-hunting mage to do the job. And because of that, she had to get out of there. The other breweries nearby were already taken by other spirits, so she set off on a journey to find a new place. But in the end, she just wandered around, got lost in the forest, and ended up collapsing. Yuri felt awful for her. People like that would never understand Marcia's side of things. She couldn't even defend herself since humans can't hear her voice. And for most humans, all they see when they look at spirits are glowing orbs floating around. She reminded him of what she said about them not talking to humans much. That's because almost no humans can actually communicate with them. That's why someone like Yuri was so incredibly rare. Yuri asked why he could see her so clearly, and she replied, "It must be your magic quality, or maybe we're just compatible." She also thinks Yuri's potions are way easier to drink than others, so his magic is seriously epic. Yuri had no idea he was special, and she was really hoping he could make some killer alcohol too. A month later, though, they found out the alcohol was a total bust, it had spoiled, and Marcia felt like her world was ending. Yuri told her to get it together and cheer up because they could just try again. And since the weather was starting to feel like autumn, they could probably find more fruit together. Yuri figured if they couldn't harvest any fruit, Marcia's spirit wasn't going to hold out for much longer. Then he heard some noises from behind the wall, but it didn't sound like something was scratching it. He wondered if something got caught in the pit he dug for defense, which would mean he should check it out and stock up on meat. But to his total shock, he found a giant bear eating the wild boar that was caught in his trap. He realized that with fall coming, it wasn't just humans, but animals were also prepping for winter. So this monster had to be getting ready for winter too. Yuri was now up against a monster bigger and meaner than any he'd ever faced. And it looked like the bear had somehow managed to yank the wild boar straight out of the pit. He remembered the #1 rule when facing a bear: don't panic. Keep your eyes on it and slowly back away. Yuri couldn't just run back home, so he decided to bolt the other way to lure the bear away from his house. As soon as the bear started chasing him, he circled around a trap and stood there, hoping the bear's massive size would cause it to fall right in. Yuri's whole plan was to finish this bear right here, right now, so he could get some peaceful sleep. But of course, the bear just sidestepped the trap, which completely caught Yuri off guard. He never thought it would be that smart. The bear charged him again with its fangs out, and Yuri decided it was time to use magic to whip up another pitfall. And this time, he actually caught the bear in a trap, but it surprised him by jumping out of the pitfall and lunging at him. Yuri stayed calm and used earth magic to catch the bear in midair, which was the perfect chance to trap it. Next, Yuri slowly filled the enclosed walls with water, and he felt bad about having to do it this way. He said a prayer for the bear since he had no choice but to kill it, and in return, he promised to put all of its parts to good use. He then used appraisal to see what the monster bear could be used for, and he figured if he could handle it, it must mean the bear monster was a total weakling, which means the locals must be used to these things. He put the bear in his storage to break it down later. And now he needed to find something today for Marcia. He explored the forest by himself and managed to find a bunch of different fruits. But when he showed them to Marcia, she was completely dead inside and claimed she'd realized this world is empty. She had totally hit her breaking point. Then he showed her a fruit that ferments and produces alcohol, which could be used instead of sake. She told him that's not it, even as she took the fruit and started eating it. According to her, they needed a drink made by people. But while she was saying that, she ended up liking the fruit and asked if there was more. Yuri figured he should just leave. Her be for now, since she seemed to have cheered up a little. Anyway, the sun was setting earlier and it was starting to get colder. That means winter is coming soon. So, they needed to start prepping for the cold to have a comfortable winter. Now he told Marcia there were 4 main things to prepare. heating stored food, clothing, and bedding. He asked her how people in the town stayed warm. She replied, "They used a fireplace." And Yuri got an idea of how to tackle this. He imagined having a fireplace too, but it would only be able to keep a small area warm while the rest of the house would still be cold. He couldn't waste firewood on such inefficient heating. So Marcia asked him what they were going to do now. He thought about it and remembered he'd gotten really good at earth magic, so he figured he'd give something a try. Marcia had no clue what he was about to do. And after a few hours, Yuri ended up making a floor heating system using the kitchen stove. She asked him, "What's this?" And he told her to go ahead and touch the floor. When she did, Marcia realized it was warm. Yuri explained he built the stove lower than the floor, so the heat would flow underneath it, warming up the floor as it passed through. Until now, he'd just been letting all the heat and smoke escape out the top. So now he could use that same smoke to keep the house warm. However, while he was explaining all this, Marcia wasn't even listening because she was so comfy on the warm floor and just wanted to pass out. Yuri decided to just let Marcia crash like that. In the meantime, he was going to go out and harvest some more crops. He figured it should be about time for him to harvest potatoes. And after he pulled them out one by one, he was impressed by how awesome they were. He wondered why people ever left this village, not knowing that he was currently living in the middle of a place more dangerous than anywhere else. Next, he spotted some different-looking leaves in the field. And he couldn't remember what they were until he just pulled one out, and it turned out to be a mandrake. Yuri had forgotten he'd planted those too. When he pulled it out with more force, Yuri discovered that a whole row of them had grown. And he had no idea what to do with all these mandrakes. He used appraisal and learned they could be used as an ingredient for medicine. And with this many, he could even open a pharmacy. So he decided to just store them away just in case. He ended up harvesting a ton of sweet potatoes and also got some more wheat meat and fruit. With all this, he'd be set until spring. Now all that was left to prep for winter was clothing and bedding. The wild boar's fur didn't seem right for clothing. However, the bear's fur might work for that, even though it would be a bit of a pain to spin it into yarn. He could make a sweater or something. And as for clothes, he had other materials which left the last problem bedding. He couldn't use bear fur for this, and if it was left as a hide, it'd be heavy and uncomfortable to sleep on. Yuri thought it might be best to make bags from plant fibers and stuff them with cotton, but he couldn't find enough cotton for that. Just then, Omochi flew in and greeted Yuri, saying, "Sakura's coming later." He noticed Omochi looked a little fluffier than usual and thought maybe he'd been feeding them too much. It could be a problem for them if they were slower around predators. Omochi told him they were just getting their winter coats, which was a natural thing for their fur to do. Yuri thought that must be it, and he wished he could have feathers for the winter too. Omochi asked him what he wanted. He replied that he wanted a lot of feathers, so if possible he wanted to know a place where he could gather them. Omochi told him about another bird species, the ruka, who had a nest around here. Suddenly, they heard Sakura crying for help. And when Yuri looked out the window, he saw a huge bird attacking Sakura, and it had wings that were at least 33 feet wide. Omochi told him that was a ruka, and it was attacking Sakura right now. Yuri thought if they got attacked by something like that, their house and fields would be totally wrecked. And more importantly, he wasn't about to let that thing eat his friends. So Yuri hit the ruka with a wind cutter, but it just deflected the attack by wrapping its body in wind magic. Next, he saw the ruka roar loudly and declare that the human down there was their prey too. Yuri realized they could strategize and attack in a pack, so he needed to prep a counterattack and fast. He decided to start off by taking out the fastest one to break their formation. And he had been training his magic every single day for this very moment. He unleashed a beam of light magic at the beast, and just as he expected, it created an opening. Next, he used dark magic to confuse the ruka pack, messing with their judgment. Now he could buy some time to concentrate and cast his final move. A mega water ball to drown those birds in midair and finish them off. Later on, when Marcia heard he caught the ruka birds, she was surprised by his achievement, while Yuri felt bad for suffocating his opponents all the time. He needed to think of a way to take them down without making them suffer so much. Marcia wonders just what is up with this kid, or if he even wants to survive or not. Yuri just put that aside and said, "Now we have all the materials for making bedding and clothes.